Good afternoon. We'd like to call to order today's October 25th, 2022 Little Rock City Board of Directors special called meeting. We would like to welcome those in attendance as well as those watching at home. Madam Clerk, if you would, please call the roll.
Director Miller? Here. Director Richardson?
Here.
Director Webb?
Here.
Director Peck?
Here.
Director Wright?
Here.
Director Wyrick?
Present.
Director Campuris? Director Phillips?
Present.
Director Adcock?
Present.
Vice Mayor Hines?
Present.
Mayor Scott?
Present. If we'll now have the invocation from City Director Antoine Phillips.
Yes, sir. Take opportunity to humble ourselves. We recognize I'm sorry, I think, am I good? Okay. We take this opportunity to recognize the responsibility and the opportunity in front of us. We ask for our guide and whoever we worship to give us the guidance and the leadership to do the work that you called us to do. We ask for the protection of everyone in our city, and especially those who are doing work on behalf of others in our city. Amen.
Amen. Will you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Vice Mayor Hines, do I entertain a motion to go in direct?
Make a motion to go into executive session.
Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second from City Director. I believe I heard Wyrick. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. Ayes have it. We'll now go to executive session.
Before we do that, Mayor, Mr. Attorney, do we need to state the purpose for the executive session? No, I asked Mr. the Attorney, Vice Mayor.
The purpose in the call was to deal with a nomination for an appointment of a commissioner to the Metropolitan Housing Alliance.
I'm just saying that wasn't said during the motion, so I was questioning whether or not we had to make that, include that in while we're going into executive session. I know why. So you just did it for us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Director Richardson. We'll ask everyone to please leave. The premises will be back shortly. Good evening. We're now back from our executive session where we went to executive session to discuss the Metro Housing Alliance Authority Board's appointment of Mr. Kenyon Lowe. Director Miller, I think I see your hand.
Yes, sir, Mayor, thanks. I want to state for the record that I have recused from this vote.
Madam Clerk, if you enter in the record that City Director Virgil Miller is recusing from this vote. I see Director Wright.
Mayor, I want to go on record as stating that I'm voting present on this. I want to make it clear so that there is no mischaracterization of why I'm voting present. I have no issue whatsoever with this particular individual. However, I do have some questions that I asked that I cannot get an answer to. And so I will be voting present until I get an answer to those questions, which I think as a legitimate board member, I have a right to ask those questions and I have a duty to ask those questions. So just so that there is no mischaracterization going out into the public, I'm voting present because I don't have some information that I requested. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Seeing no other comments from members of the board, all those in favor of Mr. Kenyon Lowe, please say aye.
I don't have a motion or a second.
A motion to ratify the appointment of Little Rock Housing Authority for other purposes.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, please say nay.
Nay.
Present.
Nays have it. For those members of the public, Mr. Moore, you'll share the next steps.
The city attorney will notify the chairperson of the housing, of Metropolitan Housing Authority tomorrow that the appointment was not approved. The MHA then has 30 days to send over another appointment request. And the board, the governing body, would then have another 45-day window once notified. Or if MHA chooses not to forward a candidate, then we would go through our normal process of filling a board or commission vacancy.
From members of the public, this is one of the few missions that's a self-appointing board within the City of Little Rock government. I believe it's Central Arkansas Water, Central Arkansas Library System, Arkansas Museum of Fine Art. Of course, this particular one, and maybe one other, I can't remember the other, but it's one of the few. So it's a different process.
May I move that we adjourn the meeting?
There's a motion and a second to adjourn from this meeting. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. Ayes have it. Meeting adjourned. We're now entering into our agenda meeting. We'll first start with the proclamation for the Filipino American History Month. I also want to recognize Mr. Joshua Price, one of our strong Filipino leaders here in the state of Arkansas, as well as the city of Little Rock, and we're so grateful to Mr. Joshua Price. Whereas Filipino Americans make up one of the largest Asian American ethnic groups in the United States today, and the earliest documented proof of Filipino presence in the continental United States was October 18th, 1587, when the first Filipinos set foot in Morro Bay, California. And whereas during World War II, more than 260,000 Filipino and Filipino American soldiers answered the call to action and bravely served and sacrificed under the American flag, with Little Rock native General Douglas MacArthur, the Filipino veterans of World War II Congressional Gold Medal Act unanimously passed through Congress and was signed into law in December of 2016. And whereas Filipino Americans have been putting their lives on the line as healthcare professionals fighting against the COVID-19 pandemic, and whereas of the 85,000 Asian American Pacific Islanders in Arkansas, Filipino Americans make up the third largest group, the majority living in Little Rock. And whereas it is necessary to instill in our youth the importance of education, history, and ethnic diversity in creating eminent role models establish proud cultural identities, and producing exceptional citizens of this nation. And whereas in 2009, U.S. Congress recognized October as Filipino American History Month in the United States to recognize and celebrate the rich culture and traditions the Filipino community have shared with our state and our nation. And now, therefore, I, Frank Scott Jr., Mayor of the City of Little Rock, Arkansas, do hereby proclaim the week of October 2022 as Filipino American History Month. Let's all give a round of applause. Mr. Joshua Price, if you'll give some brief remarks.
Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you to the City Board of Directors for this wonderful opportunity. This is actually the first time that Filipino American History Month has been recognized in the state of Arkansas. So truly thankful for that and thankful for the recognition of Filipino American sacrifices, accomplishments, and cultural contributions to our city, our state, and our nation. So on behalf of myself, who is a Filipino American, my mom is a Filipino nurse who was recruited to come to this country in 1975 to work in Murfreesboro, Arkansas, of all places. But so many of our Filipino Americans here in the city share that same story of coming over as nurses and as healthcare professionals and work at our many hospitals here in the city. Just thank you from the bottom of my heart. Maraming salamat po. Thank you for the Filipino community.
Thank you so much. Members of the board, we see item 3 is being deferred until November 15, 2022 at staff's request. Are there any questions on items 1 through 6, which are on the consent agenda? See Director Wyrick.
Thank you, Mayor. Resolution number 1, where we're abandoning a 40-foot wide utility and drainage easement. I'd like some conversation about that. What is it that we're doing? Why are we abandoning it? I know there's some issues with flooding in this particular subdivision. So I'm just curious why we're abandoning that. And then I have a question on item number 3 as well.
Director Collins. And just in the essence of time, Director Wyrick, item number 3 is deferred for another month. Do you still want to?
I just have I'd like to know why it was removed. And I know there was a question from at least one constituent about this being affordable, and just wanted to know why it was pulled down, and is it truly affordable? If it is, what's the range of pricing for homes for affordable? Just some general conversation around why it was pulled down and those thoughts. Then we'll be ready when it comes November 15th.
Okay. Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the board, this resolution is just to set November 15th as the public hearing. This subdivision, there is a sanitary sewer line that is running through the subdivision that is being relocated.
Okay.
And so this abandonment will be part of that. And it affects, I believe, about 6 lots that's been approved in the plat. And so at this time, that's what they're in that process of getting everything accepted and done. And the timing would fall out that would be the date for that hearing and for the abandonment.
Okay. So it's a relocation of a sewer line, and then
Yes.
this would be abandoned. Okay, that seems pretty simple. Okay. And then item 3.
Mr. Moore?
Dr. Wyrick, I deferred item 3 for a few reasons. One, the affordability question did come up. Mr. Howard and his key staff are attending a conference. And I know that what we have to do is sometimes we'll build a house, but then also include in a different amount of money down payment assistance that helps the affordability issue. But I just need to get more details. And then there were some issues raised about the organization, one of the organizations, and then Apparently there was a tie and there was a coin flip, and I just needed to get procurement and housing together to go over all the details.
That's good. And at some point in time, I have a question about item number 7 as well.
We'll go, I don't see any. Well, Director Adcock, do you have a question?
Items 7, 9, and 10, please.
All right. Director Collins?
Mayor, on item 7, we have our wastewater utility staff that's present to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. You may proceed. May proceed. The questions,
Yes,
Director Adcock?
I do not have questions, but I would like for you to explain it to us, please.
The ordinance has been in.
Pull your mic down just a little bit. There you go.
I'm Rebecca Berkman with the Little Rock Water Reclamation Authority. I'm the Director of Environmental
I'm sorry, we
Affairs.
still can't hear you.
Rebecca Berkman, Director of Environmental Affairs at Little Rock Water Reclamation Authority. The ordinance that is currently in place has not been updated in 22 years. We're making very little changes. It's just time for us to do a review. And all of it is minor.
And I think what we'll do for Friday, Ms. Block, if we could just have a summary memo. And we have met with the staff and with Greg, and I know it went before the Wastewater Reclamation Commission. So there are overall minor changes, real cleanup, but we'll provide those details in a memo and have it to you all by Friday.
And Mayor, I can give a little more color here as well, since I'm the liaison. This is something that staff has been working on for several years. It's been put on the shelf because of the pandemic and some other things we've had going on at the utility. So it's more like we would see when we do a cleanup of our zoning applications. This is some house cleaning that is old existing items, but we can get a more detailed report to you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Director Adcock, you had a question for item 9 and 10, you said?
Yes, for Mr. Collins, please.
Yes, ma'am. And then after that, we'll go to our 2022 millage.
Mr. Collins, there was to be a meeting between the Love Neighborhood, Goodwill Neighborhood, and the applicant. Has that been done?
I am not aware of any meeting that has been set up or has been completed.
I'm going to ask that we defer this for another 2 weeks if we do not have that meeting, because the neighborhood has requested that meeting, and I really want the applicant to meet with the neighborhood.
I will impress upon them the direction.
Okay, thank you.
Director Miller?
Thank you, Mayor. I have set up a meeting with Bishop Smith. I've talked with the neighborhood. I've talked with the Goodwill neighborhood and Love neighborhood and Hope neighborhoods. They understand we're having a meeting. They don't really have any questions about big concerns. They just want to know what's going on. I'm meeting with Bishop tomorrow. The neighborhoods have been invited to go. We're going to view the property, view what they want to do. And so that's all they want to do. So Director Adcock, a meeting has been set up, and that meeting is going to take place tomorrow.
Okay, please let me know after the meeting takes place who attends. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions, we'll now go to the 2022 millage discussion.
Mayor, members of the board, Ally, if we could bring the presentation up, and Ashley has hard copies of it. Most of you all participated in the 7 ward meetings that we conducted during the month of September. Public Works staff is in the process of going over those new requests. But what I'm going to recommend today is a little different than we've done it in the past. And there's a few just timing issues that are before us. Because if we don't act next month, because of audit issues. Our audit, as the board knows, is not completed until June of the following year. And our underwriters have said that we wouldn't be able to issue bonds until after the audit was completed and they would have audited numbers. So we'll go through this presentation and I'll show you where I'm making the changes as far as how we're going to move forward from a timing standpoint. But first, we'll have our underwriter team come forth and go over just the calendar that we're recommending, and then I'll go over the process. Ms. Burnett?
Thank you. My name is Leanne Burnett with Stevens. This first slide shows you where we've come so far in preparing for the offering of the bonds associated with the successful millage election. We have been reviewing draft documents, which include the bond ordinance and the preliminary official statement. We held this morning a call with Moody's Rating Agency, which went very well. We expect to hear next week about that, and no surprises were indicated there. On the next slide, these are the steps that will occur in order to issue the bonds and to close the bond issue, at which time the city would receive the project funds. And you can see that we are working to finalize the bond documents. We would receive the ratings on or about November 2nd. Then we would have the draft ordinance, the bond ordinance, submitted to the city for inclusion at the agenda meeting. And if you'll recall, for those of you who have been involved with the city's bond issuances before, the bond ordinance will have some blanks in it with regard to principal amount by maturity and the coupons of the bonds. Those are set the day we offer or price the bonds, which is November 15th, according to this calendar. So we would offer that morning of the 15th. We would be able to fill in those blanks for the meeting that evening, at which time the board would consider the bond ordinance, and if passed, it would then lock in those interest rates and the bond purchase agreement would be executed. The bond ordinance would then be published, and then we have to wait 30-day referendum period, and then the bond issue would close, which we are targeting for December 21st, at which time the first round of project funds would be available.
Thank you. On the next slide is the recommendation as far as this first series. So the first column is what the board, the amounts the board approved for the overall bond issue. And as you know, as we've done in the past multiple times, we do Series A, Series B, and that's because, again, we have to spend 85% of the money within a 3-year period. What's changed after the series of award meetings, though, I am recommending moving the street improvement bonds, increasing that amount. If you remember, it was about $12.8 million for drainage, $12.8 million for streets. But I think we all heard, and if you didn't attend the other awards, they were very consistent about street improvements and their needs. So in working with Mr. Honeywell and his staff, this would increase that amount by $10 million, with the majority of that money going to street resurfacing throughout each ward. Drainage improvements would, again, stay the same at 12.8. In working with Mr. Hinton and Chief Hubbard, and based on supply chain and all the other issues that we're faced with, we think the first series for fire apparatus would be $7 million. Parks and recreation improvement bonds would be $10 million, and that's $5 million for parks and $5 million for the zoo. District court facility improvement bonds, at this point, again, because of that 3-year period and having to spend the money, This would recommend setting aside $560,000 for architectural fees, then Port Industrial Park improvement bonds, and then those are taxable, would be at the $5 million level for $58.2 million. Then just to give you a little bit more detail on the street improvement, again, how we would propose breaking it out. You can see we still have the 10% citywide off the top, then 90% in ward for each, for 90% for ward projects. And you see the breakout there of streets and sidewalks and resurfacing. And then, so again, total street bonds, total there, 22 million for the street bonds. Drainage improvements, again, don't change from where we were on the next slide, please, Ally. Drainage improvements remain the same as far as the per ward number that we talked about and the at each of the ward meetings. So then you see, then this is where you see the increase from where we were for each ward. In Series A, we would now have almost $4.6 million in projects for each of the wards. Park and Rec improvement bonds, again, I mentioned the park at $5 million and zoo at $5 million for a total of $10 million. Next slide would just summarize some of the things I've said. We got to spend 85% of the bond proceeds within 3 years. We talked about the architectural fees for the court building. Important improvement bonds are taxable. I mentioned the audit issue as far as if we don't issue the bonds in November, it would be late next summer before we'd be able to issue bonds and start projects. And then just we all have been keeping up with the bond market conditions and volatility. And we don't, obviously we can't predict where we're going, but this allows us to at least get the first round of money in December. And the other thing I would say is if you go back, Ally, to the street improvement. Well, no, actually, go back to the third page. Yeah, right there. So what we're going to be asking the board to do is to approve this total amount. And then because of budget, because of holidays, the second series of neighborhood meetings, ward meetings we've talked about would be in January. None of these dollars would be spent before we have the next round of ward meetings, where, as we've done in the past, we'll sit down with each of the ward members and go over the proposed projects. And just to put in perspective, we had over 300 new projects that were submitted as a result of the ward meeting. So Public Works staff is working very hard to get all the information, but if we, again, waited until early even next year, the underwriters and our legal team have said we would then be waiting until the summer to issue bonds. We'll, again, have the ward meetings with the recommended projects, and then come back to the board with the resolution that details each of the street projects and drainage projects that we do. And once that's approved, we go forward and start designing and engineering the project. So usually we do have that second meeting where we go back before we do the bond issue, but because of the timing of the audit, again, I want to be clear with the public that there won't be any money spent on streets and drainage until we have that second round of neighborhood meetings. This just will get the first issuance of the bonds at the $58 million that we can get sometime late December, and that will start the clock on the 3-year period. So I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Mayor, I have 2 questions.
Director Phillips.
Thank you. Thank you for that presentation, Bruce, and the update. 2 questions. One, assuming we approve this proposal for Series A and everything goes as planned, how far out would it be before we do the second issuance of bonds?
It's a good question. We're not limited to wait the 3 years before we would issue Series B. And the example that I've been given, or I've been talking about, is once we get the court building designed, we don't have to wait 3 years to issue the balance of the money to build a court building. So there's really no time limit as far as how long we have to wait to the second series.
Okay, that's good to know. And then second question, just wanted to make sure I was clear on what you said as it relates to, I guess, particularly streets and drainage. Staff will come up with a recommendation and present a resolution to us for us to vote up, down, or modify, as opposed to determine which projects, will be done in the first issuance, correct?
What I have done in the past, and it's worked well, is once we have a recommended list, we'll sit down with each of the city directors and go over it. And in some cases in the past, a particular city board director would say, well, instead of this project, why don't we look at this? And we'll go back and evaluate it. Once we come to agreement, then we go back to the wards and have those recommendations. And there's been some changes made as a result of the ward meetings. And then once we compile all of that, then we'll come back with a resolution for you all to approve.
Okay, understood. That's all I have, Mayor. Thanks, Bruce.
Vice Mayor Hines.
Thanks, Bruce. And so clarity on why we're going to push the meeting off, as I understand it, is that if once we issue the bonds in November, we'll know exactly how much money we're dealing with. So that's the reason to push it into January to have those next round of public meetings.
Correct. That's another valid reason, correct?
Okay. Yeah, that to me is the most valid reason, because I think everybody's chomping at the bit, but I know that it could mean difference in several $1 million depending on the interest rate and the issuance of them. So I appreciate that. Thanks.
Seeing no other questions from members of the board, thank you so much, Mr. Moore. Meeting adjourned.